Hello, faculty and staff. My name is Tim Beckham, and today I will be sharing information on a data overview for Madison County Middle School. This presentation will break down the 7th grade math Georgia milestone scores to better understand the assessment results. Discussing the data will help us understand the data at an itemized level so we can recognize trends of strengths and weaknesses that we may need to focus on. At the conclusion of this presentation, we will be able to build off of those strengths and develop goals and strategies from the weaknesses that will drive our instruction for the upcoming school year. This professional development is designed to help decrease struggles within our classrooms based on identified gaps and strengthen student achievement throughout the year and on standardized assessments. The data supplied in this presentation was found online at GOSA, the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. This is a public record of state assessment scores and other key information that anyone can access. The purpose of my presentation today is to look over several key factors that are analyzed from the data. We will look at the strengths and weaknesses seen in our math instruction, what adjustments can be made based on the trends we see, and discuss how can our math department set goals to improve in a short-term time frame to effectively improve and evaluate our practices. Recognize struggling groups or subgroups within our student population who may need better resources, strategies, and support. And finally, what can we do to help our students improve or increase to the next higher level on the Georgia Milestones assessment? This will overall help reinforce our school improvement plan and will include the support of all stakeholders within the system. A few questions to think about during this presentation. How does Madison County Middle School compare to the district and state of Georgia in terms of CCRPI? How does Madison County Middle School compare to the district and state of Georgia in terms of the Georgia Milestones end of grade assessment? How can Madison County Middle School improve the 7th grade math EOG scores to meet the needs of the district expectations? To begin, we will take a look at CCRPI data at Madison County Middle School compared to the state. Unfortunately, the pandemic eliminated testing during the 2020-2021 school year, and last year's data hasn't been reported yet, so I wanted to take a look at a 3-year span starting in 2017-2018. As we could see from the data, Madison County Middle School was significantly higher in CCRPI score compared to the state, fluctuating in the low 80s compared to the state, which was mainly in the low 70 percentile. Over the next 4 slides, we will look at student enrollment from the total population drilled down to subgroups. Total student enrollment has steadily increased from the 2017-18 school year to the 2019-20 school year, and then leveled off in the 2021 school year, close to 1,200 students due to the pandemic. Madison County Middle School is the only middle school in the county. It's fairly large and averages around 1,150 students. Our school is fed by 5 elementary schools, and more classes are added each year to accommodate growth projections on a needed basis. Looking at this graph of student enrollment in terms of gender, and we can see the amount of males and females is fairly constant throughout the 4-year comparison. The male population was greater for 2017 through 2019. Then in 2020, the female population surpassed the male population. This next graph depicts the student enrollment for unique populations, where we can see that there is minimal variation of change in the data. There's a slight increase in gifted students over the 4-year duration from 145 to 161 students, and there's a slight decrease in students with disabilities from 182 to 145. The last graph on student enrollment shows the comparison of socioeconomic status in Madison County Middle School. Madison County Middle School is a Title I school with a high disadvantaged socioeconomic status, as you can see from the data. In 2017, we had 665 students identified as economically disadvantaged, and 430 students were classified as non-economically disadvantaged. And throughout the graphical representation, that stays steady and relevant. Again, the data was not counted due to the pandemic in 2019-2020. Over the past 4 years, student diversity has increased slightly. Not counting the pandemic year, we can see that there's a clear decrease from 74% to 65% in students that identify as white, and an increase in the students that identify as black from 7% to 12%. Other ethnicities stayed pretty constant over the time span. Changes in diversity may be affected by the pandemic and the enforced quarantines. Looking at student attendance, we can see that there has been a steady drop in the percentage of students who have missed 5 or fewer days of school. This is a negative trend that has become more of an issue since the pandemic disrupted the regular school environment. In 2019-2020, you can see the large increase in students with 5 or fewer absences at 57.8% due to the attendance being based on distance learning issues. Students were counted present if they simply turned in an assignment, logged in, or came into virtual classes. This trend continues into the 2020-21 school year with increases in 15 or more absences at almost double the average percentage from the year before at 19.6%. This is a key area to work on strategies to help reverse this negative trend. This graph depicts the number of staff we have at Madison County Middle School at a total of 94. The first pie chart shows the total number of staff members based on gender. We have 58 males and 36 females. The second pie chart shows the ethnicity of our teachers, with staff that identify as white at 94% and the staff that identify as black at 6%. Our next graph shows the total number of staff members at Madison County Middle School based on years of experience. We have one principal and 3 assistant principals. You can see a wide spectrum of experience from our administrators that range from 1 year to over 30. 36 of our teachers have 10 to 20 years of experience, which is the bulk of the data. 14 teachers between 20 and 30, and 4 teachers at 30 or more years of experience. The data is evenly distributed, very much in a bell-shaped model. Most of our support staff has 10 years or more experience. Over the next 4 graphs, we will look at the analysis of the Georgia Milestones assessment scores and percentages from different aspects. All the graphs show the comparison based on 7th grade math scores and results. The 2019-20 year is absent due to the state canceling all milestone assessments. Georgia milestone assessments are based on 4 achievement levels, which are designated as beginning, developing, proficient, and distinguished. Beginning learners show the least mastery of the content standards, and distinguished show the highest achievement of the content standards. This graph shows a comparison of 7th grade math students compared to all 7th grade math students in the state of Georgia. We can see that the beginners level is significantly lower at MCMS than the state. MCMS consistently stays below 12%, and the state more than doubles that amount with percentages greater than 25% in its lowest value. The developing levels for both MCMS and the state stay fairly even, but prior to the pandemic, MCMS was a good margin lower, and post-pandemic, we surpassed the state with 40.8%. MCMS has a significantly higher percentage of proficient students in the state over the 3-year span, with the most recent 2020-21 school year at 34.2% and the state at 24.7%. The state has a greater percentage of distinguished students, with the most recent 2019-2020 values being 38% and MCMS at 13.2%. Overall, we can see MCMS has less students struggling, but more students not showing mastery of the content standards. We need to strategize and focus on the content standards that students are struggling with the most. More rigorous instructional practices need to be implemented, and more strategies need to be applied to help remedy the lack of students reaching the proficient and distinguished levels of achievement. Looking at the next graph, we can see the comparison of males and females in 7th grade math at MCMS to the state. MCMS has a lot fewer students in the beginning level compared to the state, but a greater number of both males and females at the developing level. At the beginning level for females, the state sits at 28.3%, and MCMS resides at only 10%, which is a positive trend. At the developing level, females at MCMS are at 43.2%, and the state is only at 39.3%. MCMS has a much greater value of students at the proficient level than the state. The males at MCMS hold a 35.3% compared to the state at 22.8%. Both MCMS and the state are steady between 9 and 14% distinguished, with MCMS having a slightly higher edge on the state overall. Our third slide on milestone data compares milestone scores for students with disabilities and students without disabilities between MCMS and the state. In 2018-19, we can see the students with disabilities outperform the state overall, except in the developing level where MCMS held a 40% compared to the state's 30.6%. In the same year, the students without disabilities had much higher percentages than the state at the proficient and distinguished levels, with fewer students at the beginning and developing stages. MCMS has 42.4% proficient compared to the state at 30.8%. Moving over to 2020-21, we can see that the students with disability percentages of struggling increased from the previous year. Compared to the state, our percentages look better due to the massive increase in students at the beginning level for the state at 59.3%, compared to MCMS at 26.1%. Both populations struggle tremendously, and most students are in the beginning and developing levels. Looking at the last column in 2020-21 for students without disabilities, MCMS students outperform the state in all areas, specifically the proficient level where MCMS held 36.6% proficiency and the state held 27.4%. Our last graph represents the 7th grade math milestones data based on race and ethnicity for the 2020-21 school year. Looking at the data, we can see that students identifying as white and Asian had significantly higher percentages in the proficient and distinguished levels. White students at 40.1% and Asian students at 27.3%. The students who identified as multiracial did hold a percentage of 29.2% proficient, but struggled at the distinguished level. The majority of students who identify as Black or Hispanic had greater percentages in the beginning and developing levels. Students who identify as Black had the majority of their scores in the developing level at 62.5%, and students who identify as Hispanic were a little lower at 53.6% developing. Some of the major strengths recognized through the data at MCMS where most teachers have multiple years of experience, CCRPI scores are consistently higher than the state by large margins, the percentage of students achieving the proficient level on the milestones is consistently higher than the state. Some key weaknesses seen in the data were Black and Hispanic students are performing lower than every other race or ethnic group on the milestone. Discrepancies between the number of males and females performing at the developing and proficient levels on the milestone were clearly seen. An increase in the number of developing students and decreased number of proficient students during the 2020-21 school year, and not having a diversified staff. A few things to consider for what's next after looking at this data are to discuss what possible causes for gaps are seen in the results, discuss what didn't work for us, and decide what professional development is needed, determine the essential standards that need to be addressed, discuss what really stood out in the data overview, develop new assessments based on analysis, and investigate strands within the data that need to be improved. Thank you for allowing me to share this data with you today, and hopefully we can see positive outcomes moving forward.